Good evening. We will call the meeting to order at 6:27. And if we could do roll call, please.
Commissioner Reynolds.
Here.
Commissioner Kendall.
Here.
Commissioner Garrett.
Here.
And for the record, Chair Irvine and Vice Chair Etter are absent. There is a quorum of the Planning Commission. Mary, or Commissioner Kendall, you may proceed.
Okay. For our agenda, is that the next?
Yes.
All matters listed within the consent agenda. No?
Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner, we do need to have formal action on the consent agenda to consider approval of the March 5th, 2025 minutes.
Oh, okay. I don't need to read that little paragraph.
No,
Okay.
no.
So under consent agenda, I'm asking for approval for March 5th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Is there a commissioner that has any questions or need or good with it?
Commissioner Reynolds, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes and consent agenda from the last meeting.
You can-
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Our Planning Commission minutes from March 5th is approved. Okay, in our regular agenda, yay. Updates to the Housing Action Plan and a presentation by Eco Northwest regarding the Madras Housing Action Plan.
Thank you, Commissioners. So this is our second meeting where we will discuss the Housing Action Plan. Tonight, we will focus on the financial analysis related to housing in Madras. And as certainly Commissioner Reynolds and Kendall will remember, at our first meeting when we discussed this, there was a lot of questions, or starting to be questions, about the financial aspects of housing. And so this presentation is intended to respond to that, pardon me, and answer a lot of your questions. So with that said, we have Becky Hewitt again from Eco Northwest. She's joining us by Zoom. She will present the presentation, and I'll hand that off to her now. And Becky, good evening. Thank you for joining us. I would ask if you could clarify for our commissioners whether you would like questions during the presentation or maybe afterwards. That way we have understanding of whether we're proceeding or halting as needed.
It's very hard for me to see you all, but I would invite Nick, maybe you can speak up if somebody, I'd say if folks have clarifying questions, if things aren't making sense, I would love for you to go ahead and flag me to stop. And then if I think that I'm going to clarify that in just a minute, if we get to the next slide, I'll let you know. But otherwise, I would say let's go ahead and take at least clarifying questions as they come up, and then there should be plenty of time for discussion following the presentation. Does that work?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. And Nick, yeah, I will rely on you to make a loud noise if you need for me to stop, because there's a 0% chance I'll be able to see hands from how small they are on my screen. Okay. So are we ready to jump in?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, welcome back to this topic. Thanks for the additional time here. So as Nick said, this is sort of giving you an opportunity to hear a little bit more about some slides that were included in your packet previously, but that we didn't go over. So our work with the city included looking at the zoning code, talking to folks in the local development community, and looking at market conditions, and this piece of taking a look at the city's existing financial incentives, or the I'm aware that the system development charge reductions recently expired, but the ones that were in place when we started the project, and take a look at whether there's whether some modifications to those are appropriate. So the specific questions that we were looking into were whether the market rents and sales prices, what level of affordability, what income levels those might serve at market rate, whether incentives are needed to make various different types of housing feasible, make them pencil out, if you will, for developers at the market rents and sales prices, what kind of buy downs you would need to achieve if you wanted to make things affordable to a specific income level, what kind of incentives would you need to get there? And to consider that both for a project that would be all income restricted, as well as for projects that might be mixed income, and see how that might change things. And then to take a look at other possible financial incentives beyond the ones that the city has been using, to see how those might fit in as part of a package to support the city's broader housing goals. So next slide. Okay, so we looked at a range of different types of housing, and we made some assumptions about what kind of, what size of units we were looking at. And we estimated what the market sales prices or rents would be based on looking at things that have been built recently in Madras and in surrounding communities. So we looked at larger single family homes, something like a 4-bed, over 2,000 square foot home. And we looked at also a medium size, like a 3-bed, slightly smaller unit, and then even smaller than that would be like a cottage housing unit, or just a small detached home closer to 1,000 square feet. And we also looked at townhouses. So those were the 4 we looked at that are all assumed to be built for sale. You can see a range of estimated sales prices for those. Again, that's looking at the prices of things that have been sold recently in Madras and were recently completed. And then we also looked at walk-up apartments and estimated an average rent for those based on the mix and the unit sizes and the estimated rents at some of the recently completed apartments in Madras. So these are illustrative examples. They're not a literal actual development, but they are informed by the actual developments in Madras. And that these types, you're going to see that housing type column, you're going to see those names appear later as we get into kind of the results and the answers to those questions. All right, next.
If I could just add real
Oh,
quick, so
yeah,
commissioners, the housing types, for the most part, do also align with the city's development code. So that's not by accident. Okay, so when you look at our development code and which housing types are permitted in each zones and the regulations associated, it's going back to this analysis supports that, so that there is consistency, no kind of blending of terminology. So I think that's also important, that when we do this analysis, the same terminology is being used in our codes. So when we move towards implementation, there's no confusion about that.
Is that because of all that time we spent with all the different code changes that we made last year with cottage houses, with townhouses? Remember, we went
Yes,
for many
yes.
meetings.
Yeah, I refer to
Over.
those as the 2002 middle income housing code changes. And I don't remember the ordinance number, and frankly,
No.
it's in the
I don't either,
number,
but
but
remember we had the pictures of all the different
yes,
ones, and
that is exactly
we
right.
wanted to make the codes to match so that it would be easier for the developers to have all that. So
Yep.
now we're all in this one big nice unity of that. And now we're moving forward with that already as our foundational piece.
Correct. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So for comparison, and you'll get to see these lined up against each other in just a minute, but for comparison, these are the sales prices and rents that are considered affordable for different percentages of the area median income, AMI. So the area median income is set at the region, in this case, county level, and it's calculated for a 4-person household and then adjusted up and down with household size. But this is looking at at what those prices and rents would be. The sales price ones are not scaled by unit size, but rents are the way that affordable rents are set by the housing agencies. When they establish eligibility, they adjust so you can charge less for a 1-bedroom than for a 2-bedroom. So these affordable monthly rents are we've adjusted them so that they're comparable to those market rents that we showed based on the mix of unit sizes. So for a household at 60% of area median income, what's considered an affordable monthly rent for, something like in that sort of blended average of a 1 and 2-bedroom is about $950 a month. What they can afford as a sales price depends a lot on the interest rates, like it does for everyone else. And so you can see, if we're at 7% interest rates, that number is pretty low, $177,000. If the interest rates were to come back down closer to 5.5%, be a little over $200,000 that somebody could afford at 60% of area median income. And there's a note here, there are challenges with qualifying for mortgages for folks at that income level that go beyond just the affordability as well. But so that's that kind of, to hit that lowest 60% of area median income level, you're talking about a pretty low sales price. When you get up to 120% of area median income, which is considered kind of a middle income, you're looking at an affordable monthly rent of close to $2,000 a month. And I would note that might sound like a lot. It does to me. It's based on assuming that someone would spend 30% of their monthly income on rent. If you translate into sales prices, you're looking at between $350,000 and $411,000, again, depending on interest rates.
If we go back to the slide, to me, this slide matters because I generally think about the distribution of income in our community. How many people earn, how much household income they have. And we probably have more people earning probably between 60 and obviously 100, but there's probably more people earning around the 80% AMI level. Okay, now think in your head, because we all have apps and sometimes we look at the newspaper. How many homes are listed between 274 and 236,000? Not many, that's right. Turn on your mic, please.
I didn't see one on Zillow under 3 in this market in Jefferson County.
So this is just another indicator of where we're going in this presentation and the financial incentives. So to kind of put this practically on the ground.
This was another issue. What I brought up with Mary is you've got new builds priced $220 a square foot, and then you've got older homes that are priced similarly at 200. I mean, basically, you've got people that, with these older homes that are, they're marking up the price of their older homes too.
Yeah.
Because,
You're exactly right, Commissioner. And that's why, to kind of go back to the last meeting,
yeah,
when we talked at a high level about the housing action plan, there was a lot of discussion about how we increase really supply of housing, right? Because there just isn't a lot of market options or just number of units available right now. So again, think back to the prior presentation. I'll try to help you with key policy objectives that we're trying to move forward. But these are the numbers that are really supporting a lot of the actions that we identified in the plan at the last meeting.
okay.
Is this whole last meeting, this whole presentation, I know we're talking about finances more now, but like you said, if we don't have the supply, finances is a moot point. And he had mentioned that we were talking last meeting about incentives to give contractors to build so that the supply can increase, hopefully bringing down the pricing of the homes. But we also have to get contractors that are going to be building more affordable homes. You can't throw up, 2,500 square foot home, custom built luxury, and that's not going to be in the $200,000 range.
Absolutely.
no
Yeah.
matter
No,
what.
we understand that. And I think maybe say it a little bit differently. So remember, we're studying a market in our economy. And so there's lots of different factors that play into that, right? And so when the market isn't providing a good or service that's needed, there's an intervention needed, right? And so that's why we're talking about the incentives, because really what we have now, I would say before 2001 or 2021, we didn't have a state mandate. Before then, we had a local desire to create housing, more housing in our community. Now we have a mandate, but still, either way, there's a governmental intervention needed, right? So that's really what we're talking about here. And what
And
makes sense.
So, sorry, one question. So is the goal to increase supply to drive down the price of current homes that are marketed, or is it just to subsidize the current builders that are building and developing to build a cheaper home or a more affordable home? Sorry.
So I think, again, going back to the questions about this financial study and the broader study is, how do we better meet the housing needs of our community?
Yes.
And, I don't think that is, my recommendation to the city administrator and the council will be, you should not focus on one segment of the market, meaning household income type, right? For the last 5 years, we've looked at affordable housing, middle income, and then market rate housing. I think we need to continue that, probably put more incentive dollars in towards workforce housing, that middle income, and affordable, because they're so much more expensive and complicated to build. But you need all segments of the market. It's very clear.
So in doing so, are you creating basically a permanent renter class? Or is that by doing so? I mean, no.
No, because we're building the housing types that are being modeled in this analysis are not limited to rentals. There's home ownership options as well.
Yeah, but if you take the less focus of the aspect of the AMI as far as determining what type of housing to build, and then I guess a second vein off that would, or a variant off that would be to provide workforce housing, or not provide, but have workforce housing be an option. I mean.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's really what the next slide is really going to start to introduce. As we look at these income levels and what they can afford, what are the different housing types that can be built, and what's the amount of incentive we need to get those housing types that candidly aren't very plentiful in the community.
I have a question too, actually. So if we give developers incentives to build housing, is the incentives tied to them building the specific type of housing that's going to target 80% AMI, or is it going to be, like, are they going to be required to sell to that segment? So like homeowners would have to indicate that, show their income level before they
Yes.
buy the home.
So that's kind of where we're going after we adopt the housing action plan, and probably in the next 45 days, maybe 60 days. The city intends to change its housing incentive policies, or pardon me, programs. So if we're going to incentivize workforce or affordable housing, there will be requirements that come along with that after they construct. So, you know, in certain cases, maybe they need to require that that house is either rented or owned by someone of a certain income level for, you know, maybe 10 years. It's 20, 30. State and federal has 99-year requirements. We're not probably going to do that, but we do need to add to the program right now affordability requirements where we don't have them currently.
I think there's some really good questions there, and I suspect some of them will get there's some of the upcoming slides might be helpful for folks. So somebody was kind of pointing out how this was sort of what those two slides were building to, and that comparison that folks were noticing between what's affordable at different income levels and then kind of where the market is. So this is focusing on new. If you were to build new, what that market pricing would look like. That orange box is around the, you know, what's affordable to the 80 to 120% of AMI, those kind of middle income households. So what that's showing is that new market rate apartments, townhouses, cottage housing, or other small detached homes, if you could, you know, to the extent that the market can build those things, and this gets at the supply question that folks are raising, to the extent that the market can deliver new supply at of those types, they're likely to be affordable to those kind of middle income households without being further restricted. They might need a subsidy to be feasible, but just at their market prices, they would be affordable to that kind of middle income, moderate income household. They're still not going to be affordable to households that are earning 60% of area median income, or even necessarily 80% of area median income. But for folks kind of a little above that 80 and between that 80 and 120% of area median income, some folks might be able to afford new construction, cottage housing, townhouses, and garden apartments without them having an additional rent restriction in place or price restriction in place. For larger homes, the medium single family and larger single family, most new single family homes, unless they're the pretty small units, most of those are not going to be affordable to households at that moderate income level. They're mostly, especially with the way interest rates are, they're mostly only going to be affordable to higher income households. That's true in a lot of markets, not just in Madras. But even in Madras, that's true, that the new supply that comes online of larger homes, larger detached homes, most of that is going to hit at a level that only your higher income households are going to be able to afford. And as Nick said, that's not a huge slice of your market, of your population. So this is just showing, somebody was asking about kind of where the incentives show up. So I'll try to speak to that a little bit here. But what we're doing when we're trying to understand, does something pencil out for a developer, is we are looking at the expected value, the value of the development. So that's that orange bar. If it's for sale housing, it's a little bit simpler. It's the amount you can sell it for minus the sales commission and making sure that there's enough profit in there for the developer. On rental, it's more complicated. I won't get into that formula unless folks have questions. But basically, the value of the development when it's finished, that has to exceed the costs by some margin, right? You have to be able to make money building the thing. And so the cost includes the construction, it includes carrying costs, it includes local fees, includes the cost of engineering and design and all that, as well as the cost of land. So the incentives really hit on that cost side, and they can bring down the cost side, which is helpful if your sales prices or the value of the development is lower because your market is not, your market pricing is not very high. It's really helpful to keep the costs down. So this is looking at the incentives you have right now versus what it would take to make all of these types of development pencil out. So for larger detached homes, our analysis suggests that they actually do not need incentives anymore based on where your market is. There's not necessarily a huge amount of demand for those, but if they could achieve the pricing that that we've seen in your market, they probably can pencil out. The smaller units, the cottage housing and townhouses, there's a gap there. They're not able, the costs are too high relative to those sales prices. So if you could build them and sell them, they would be affordable, but you can't make money building them right now. So those need incentive, and they need more of an incentive than what they're getting currently. Garden apartments, also, our analysis suggests they need potentially a little bit more incentive than they're currently getting. It's not too far off, but they may need a little bit more incentive than what they're getting today as well. Okay. All right, so that's what would it take to make it pencil at the market rate. This one's a little bit more complicated, but bear with me for just a minute. So this is looking at if you wanted to take, I'll take the sort of most extreme example first. So if you have a large single family home and you want that brand new large single family home to be affordable to a household at 60% of area median income, it's going to need over $250,000 worth of subsidy to buy down that market price to an affordable price for a household earning 60% of area median income. Right. So this is just showing that that using large single detached houses to achieve affordability at those lower income levels that's a big gap to fill. That's a lot of subsidy that would be needed. If you look at the cottage housing and the smaller units, the gap there is a little bit smaller because the pricing, again, they're not as expensive to start with. So that's just showing that, some of these are closer, their market rate pricing is closer to being affordable at specific levels than others. But there's, if you wanted to get these to be affordable at 80% of area median income, which is the orange bar across this chart, it's still going to take quite a bit of subsidy to make any of these affordable at 80% of area median income. They all do have a gap between what their market pricing would be and what's affordable to a household at 80% of area median income. Okay. If you were talking about mixed income development, the starting point is still the same, but you have some potential for what's called cross subsidy, meaning that the units that are more financially feasible can offset some of the cost of the smaller and more affordable units. So if a developer was able to build a mix of different types of housing, and if they were able to make the smaller units, the affordable ones, they might need a little bit less subsidy than if they were to build, let's say, all one thing, like all medium detached homes, and all of them had to be subsidized to the same extent. If the city is trying to continue with an opt-in voluntary program, right? Nobody is requiring any of the developers to participate in these incentives or to provide some level of affordability. It's just an incentive that's trying to make developers, encourage developers in producing things that the city needs. So in order for that to work, the incentive that the city offers has to outweigh the cost of that affordability discount that the developer is offering. So, or if it doesn't dollar for dollar pencil out, there needs to be some other benefit there, like it moves things forward faster, or it provides them with capital at a time that they don't have as much access to financing, something like that, where there's some other benefit that they can point to that helps them make that development work. But generally, you're going to want to see for a voluntary incentive, there has to be, you kind of have to incentivize, you have to give more than you get by a little bit so that people will choose to participate in the program. The takeaways from that, from looking at, this is just takeaways relative to your existing incentives. So the smaller housing types, they're kind of that middle income affordable based on market pricing without a deed restriction. But they still need incentives in order to be feasible. And then the market rate apartments are, again, sort of affordable at that middle income. It's hard, financing in general is hard right now. And so they also still need an incentive for feasibility reasons. There's the note here about without a deed restriction. I just wanted to touch back on something that Nick mentioned and that came up in that conversation. Would you be getting a guarantee of affordability? And I think it's a really important question for the city to consider. It's something that I know the city is going to be looking at as part of the update to the financial incentives. But there are trade-offs of if you put a deed restriction or something else in place that says you can only sell this for this much, or you can only sell it to households that can show that their income is below this threshold, there's some administrative effort that goes into that, both on the city side and on the developer side and on the buyer or renter side, right? That creates some work for everyone to show that this is what's happening. Sometimes sometimes the effort on the city side is problematic because the city doesn't have enough staff to kind of make sure that those agreements are being followed. Sometimes it's problematic on the buyer or the renter because they might say, that really isn't much of a discount. I'm not really saving that much money and I have to jump through all these hoops to prove my income and do all this stuff. And so sometimes when you require units to be affordable at a certain level and you put restrictions in place, sometimes you narrow down the pool of households that make enough money that they can qualify for a mortgage to buy the house, but not so much money. So you kind of get boxed in a little bit on who is eligible for those units. So that's why it's kind of important to note that some of these smaller housing types, they can hit that kind of middle income level with or without a deed restriction, even if they don't have a deed restriction in place. And so getting more supply of those types, it doesn't help all the households at all the income levels directly, but it does expand the options in that middle income range. Okay, I've got a couple more slides about other financial incentives and kind of where we landed in terms of how to think about the incentives going forward. And then I'm really interested to hear folks' thoughts and questions. We looked at a couple of tax abatement programs, but some important context for tax abatements. You already have the Housing Urban Renewal District. It covers a lot of your developable residential land, but mostly the kind of bigger chunks. It does not cover the kind of more central infill and redevelopment areas, which are generally zoned R2 or commercial zones that allow residential. And I can explain further if folks have questions, but generally are not going to want to combine the HURD and a tax abatement program. They don't work super well together. They're a little duplicative and they just don't play that nicely together. So you would generally want to apply tax abatements, if you were to do them, to places that are not covered by the HURD. So the two, if you can go to the next slide, there's two programs that you might consider. One, multiple unit property tax exemption, sometimes called MUPD, and the other a vertical housing development zone, or VHDZ. These are both 10-year property tax abatements. They're both in areas that the city designates. The big difference here is that the vertical housing development zone is only for projects that are mixed use and have a ground floor commercial component. MUPD can be with or without a commercial component, and it's also much more flexible for the city to set what the criteria are for to qualify. Was there a question? Sorry, I can't hear very well.
Is there questions, commissioners? If so, please speak in your microphone so that she can hear those.
I was just noting that the one that's vertical housing development zone, a commercial is required on the ground floor. Is that what all those downtown building apartments in Bend years ago that they were building, where there was retail on the bottom and either condominiums or rentals above it? Is that type of program?
So no, I don't think the city of Bend used the vertical housing
But they had
development
commercial on
zone.
the bottom.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, they do. And they also have housing above them.
Mhm.
I will note that, forget the name of the development. I wanted to, thank you. The Jack Straw development, the new, I think 5 or 6 story multifamily development next to the box factory in Bend, just north of the old mill
Mhm.
in Highway 97. They use the MUPD program. City of Bend used
But
that.
that's without commercial.
Right. But there is a commercial.
MUPD
element to it.
can, yeah, MUPD can apply with or without commercial, so it doesn't
Okay.
exclude. And then the
Okay.
vertical housing development zone is just more limited and only applies if there's commercial. So that type of development would be eligible for, like, hypothetically, if Bend had a vertical housing development zone, though the types of projects you're referencing would likely qualify for a vertical housing development zone. But as Nick's saying, I don't believe that Bend has used that specific tool in that area.
Who gets the incentives? The developers or the people that are buying them? The developers?
So it's a property tax abatement, and so the property owner gets
Oh,
the
okay.
abatement. It's just their property tax bill shows up less. So it's different from how the Housing Urban Renewal District works, but it's just a reduction on the property tax bill. And so, like, if the developer were to build an apartment building and then sell it to an investor, the investor gets the value of the abatement. That factors into the value of the development. So the developer does benefit, but a little bit indirectly sometimes, depending on whether they continue to hold on to the development or not when they're done.
So that they're building what they're developing, what they're building for people to live in above these commercial, if it's the vertical program above the commercials. The people really may or may not get a lower priced, more affordable home. It's their savings is really just taxes, property taxes.
So in the case of an apartment, a rental apartment, it is possible that their rent would be a little bit less because the property taxes are less. But that's not something I would count on. The incentive is generally making the development viable that would not otherwise have been viable. So it is creating supply versus creating affordability. That's what these are generally designed to do.
Oh, these are designed to
Yeah,
come
and
supply. Okay.
So again,
Yes.
going back to the Jack Straw development in Bend, part of the public outcry for that project was to use the MUPT program. And they got they will have a very significant property tax abatement. But I don't see how that project's less than 60 million. And so they'll have 100%, up to 100%, depending on how the city of Bend structured it, of their property taxes, and they only got 10 affordable units. So there's kind of two things that's going on here.
Same time.
One is you are incentivizing development that from an economic perspective is not financially viable.
Right.
And then two, you could also add in affordability requirements for it. And that's why the city of Bend paused their program. I don't believe they've reinstated it, but they're in the process of really turning that program upside down and really, of course, using the property tax abatement to incentivize development that's not viable economically,
Okay.
and also create affordable housing, more than 10 units in a 200
Right.
plus unit development.
Right.
Were there any firings as a result of that project?
No, I don't
Okay, I'm
track
just-
that.
Yeah.
And how
And-
long would this abatement, 100% building improvement value for 10 years? How
For
long
10
are these
years.
abatements go? Is that
10 years.
variable?
It's a
10
10-year, they're both 10-year abatements.
Okay.
So after 10 years, the full value comes back onto the tax rolls.
So-
Wow. So you're hoping that the people, it's like those loans, you're hoping that by 10 years, they'll be making enough money to pay more than interest.
And this is in a rental situation, what you're doing is, often when a apartment gets built initially, it's a little bit like if you think about, when you buy a home, if your income goes up over time and your mortgage payment stays fixed, then like the tightest years are those first years after you got this payment and you've just barely making your payments, you've just barely qualified. But then over time, if your income goes up and that payment stays fixed, you get a little bit more of a breathing
Right,
room there.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So,
saying is they're hoping
same-
that people's, income will
And
go
by
up.
people in this case, you're talking about the investor or the property owner that rents over time, and that their rents will have gone up, just even if it's just with inflation, enough that by the time that property tax abatement expires, they've got a little bit more breathing room on their other, the difference between rents and their other expenses, so that they can absorb that increase in property taxes. And they know it's coming, right? It's not a surprise. They know what they've signed up for and when it goes away. And so they factor that in to their financial models.
Becky, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's
Okay.
just not
Does
great.
time of ownership, if it's one owner, multiple owners in that 10-year window, does that change the abatement?
Qualification.
No, the whatever years were agreed to prior to the development. Does it
It
stay with the
runs with
property?
the development. Yeah, it runs with
Okay,
the
it stays with
property,
the
not the property owner.
Okay.
Have you seen any success with like developing using whether it's the MUPT or the VHDZ in an opportunity zone?
So opportunity zone is like its own separate animal. And actually, like Salem as an example, their downtown is an opportunity zone. They actually, I'm trying to remember, they have a program they call it MUTIP, but it's the same as MUPT. It's just under a different name. And so they do have both there. They're not linked in any way. They're just
No.
two totally separately operating incentives.
Well, to think about it, say it a little bit differently. So the Opportunity Zone is a federal program
Correct.
for federal tax, I guess, relief for a business. The MUPT is a local property tax. So it's a local decision.
Yes.
And so you could marry the two together, but
Correct, is like this identifying properties that maybe are both within both zones to basically take advantage of the tax incentives for. So what my understanding is with opportunity zones, it's basically a relief on capital gains as long as you hold the property for 10 years. You do not pay capital gains at the exit of that property when you sell. Now, there are, yeah, the other incentives have gone away, the 10-year, they're the 10% discount that you got on basically doing it 1031 or exchanging capital gains into that property after 5 and after 7, or after 3 and after 5 years, those are gone. But the underlying basis of developing a property in that opportunity zone, which Madras has quite a bit of on the east side, which again, I think the VHDZ would qualify for both. You'd have the commercial on the first floor development and then residential on the second. I mean, have you seen it? Have you seen where that has incentivized any builders in building where they see that, hey, this is an opportunity zone, I get to double dip, basically, more bang for the buck?
I guess I am not sure whether any of the recent developments in Salem's downtown tapped into opportunity zone funds or not. I don't know. That's not something that the city of Salem tracks, to my knowledge. It's at least not something that I have data on. So it's possible, can't rule it out, but because they're so, as Nick said, one's federal, one's local, I'm not even sure that there's so little local involvement in the opportunity zones that I'm not even sure they would know if the development was
there's also very public reporting or information on it, because the private sector, private entities are setting up I forget the term, but they have to,
Opportunity fund.
yeah, the fund, and
Yeah.
then they have to, get the investors or whatever, so that, that all happens completely outside of
Correct.
local government. There's
Yeah.
no reporting on that. That's all an IRS sort of thing. So we don't get really any information on that. It would be a developer happens to mention it, that you could ask them about it. They might give you information on it. I mean, that's why it's.
No, I'm just saying
yeah.
that if a property you can possibly just, hey, there are federal incentives, just say in development of this property, I think you got about 2 years left, or a year and a half.
When I talk with Economic Development of Central Oregon about the opportunity zone and potential for Madras, when the program is set up, and then recently, there's no interest in Madras. If you look at the opportunity zones, it is entities who have capital gains and they want to invest it in areas of their choosing. And those have largely occurred in Bend.
Okay. More bang for the buck in Bend.
Can I ask a question about the MUFTI? So is the idea with this that these areas where this would apply, that's just going to bring those units to the market that are going to rent at market rate for that, if it's a 2-bedroom apartment for somebody who's making, 80% AMI. The idea is that we're just building them that would not get built in the first place. And the development you talked about in Bend seems like Bend is going to get lots of rent for properties there because everybody wants to live there. Here, it's going to be working families that need a place to live. And so now we are incentivizing developers to build these apartments or townhouses or cottages that just wouldn't be built otherwise.
That's correct. I think what you may be implying or not saying is there is an affordability requirement. At least you can require
that's
it.
up to the city.
But you might not need to, because if the market has enough apartments available, that's going to keep rents down. I mean, when I moved here, I had this issue. We couldn't find a place to live.
Yeah.
And so that drives up the price, because if there's 3 apartments and 5 people want it, you can charge more for it.
Yep.
But if we have a flood of new apartments, it's gonna keep the prices down.
Yeah, and this is why when some of our developers or apartment owners starting to complain about prices are coming down, I smile because public policy works. We're incentivizing housing in part so there's more options and prices are at least stabilized, if not go down. Part of, there's other market forces that go involved in that. But I would say that the MUPTI program, if the city is going to use that, we need to not only use those property tax abatements for 10 years to realize development that wouldn't normally happen because of economics, but we also need to have affordable housing as part of that.
Right.
That's the city's, right? So the city can decide and just,
You will be upset if you start giving away. I mean,
Right.
you realize, so up at Yarrow, so they build 24 and 32 unit buildings. A single building is 24, 32 units. Those are $4 to $5 million a piece, right? And so right now, about 40% of that value goes to taxes. You multiply that by 3.31, which is our tax rate, and that's what you get in taxes. It's a big number. If you're only just saying, hey, we want you to come and develop some bare land or redevelop some land, and you don't have any affordability requirement, speaking of firings, I think there would be some scrutiny in this community. Now, does it need to be entirely affordable? No. It would be, some percentage, maybe, 10, 20% of those units versus the others would be a market, right? But that's the sort of thing that you can get creative in these programs.
and just as another example, so Cottage Grove, which is a more similar market to yours than Bend in a lot of ways, they have the MUPTI program in place, and they had it there a couple of years ago when they had a school site came available, surplus land for redevelopment. And part of the way that ended up redeveloping with a mix of housing, but including a decent sized apartment development, especially for a small town like Cottage Grove. And one of the things that made that work was that they had MUPTI available. They don't have any affordability requirement at all. It was fully market rate. But their market was at a place where that they weren't going to get the apartments at all if they didn't have that incentive program. So it's something that like each city, what a nice thing with MUPTI is that each city can decide, do they want to require affordability for all developments? Do they not want to require it for any developments? Or they want it to be an option? Like generally you have to provide some kind of public benefit to qualify for MUPTI, but the city gets to really decide what that public benefit is. So sometimes that's like, well, I want you to do LEED certified development, or I want you to provide daycare space, or I want you to whatever. They can have a whole list. Sometimes there's like 15 things on the list of potential public benefits, and the developer gets to choose. And sometimes one of those is do some affordable units. But the city, the nice thing with MUPTI is that the city can really figure out what makes sense given your market, your needs, your priorities, and you can calibrate, is it 20% of units at 80% of area median income? Is it 10% of units at 80% of area median income? Is it something else? You can figure out what makes sense for your market and your community, and then say, these are the criteria. If you want this abatement, this is what it takes. And if nobody takes that, then you can look at those criteria again and say, okay, well, do we need to be a little more flexible? Do we need to prioritize supply over whatever else we were getting? But you have that flexibility. The VHDZ, it's pretty much all in statute. The only thing the city does is decide where to put it. So it's a much more like scripted program. It just is what it is. You use it or you don't. And it nominally has a benefit if there are affordable units, but the benefit is so small, it's not even really, I didn't even mention it because it's not enough to make a difference. So MUPTI can potentially be used as an incentive for mixed income development. VHDZ is really only if you have places where you really want ground floor commercial and you really want housing, and you think it's important enough to get both of those things regardless of the rents, that you are willing to offer a tax abatement, because it is hard for developers to build a mixed use building. And if you have some places around or downtown or whatever where you're like, I really want to get, this is the thing that we really want here, because it's going to really help our community for other reasons, then that's what the VHDZ is kind of aimed at.
Yeah, just final comment on this slide. I would say, note in the MUPTE program, it is city tax only. So if you've heard concerns recently about the impacts to their city's housing urban renewal district to the other taxing districts, if we were to use MUPTE for, let's say, a project in downtown, the other taxing districts wouldn't be hurt. It would be just city taxes, right?
And right, unless you
Yes.
get the other taxing districts to participate. And the only thing I would say is that if they don't, then you are very unlikely to be able to get an affordability incentive in exchange for city taxes only. It's almost never enough of an abatement. It would help if it's just a supply issue, but if you're trying to get to some percentage of affordable units, you're generally going to need to go out and get the support of enough of the other taxing districts to be able to exempt the whole tax roll.
So that means we would have to go to the county to see if they
Oh,
would
there's-
work within it.
There's like 9 taxing districts in the city's tax code.
Oh,
Yeah,
So
you
there-
wouldn't need all of them, but you would
I mean,
have
so
to do the
it's
math.
county, it's
and
pool, I mean, all the different taxing districts.
Have those conversations been had with them for this kind of thing?
No, the MUPTE program's just being introduced in this housing action plan. It was identified in the original housing action plan as a potential option, but we at that time didn't see it as effective for creating new multifamily development.
In other cities, like maybe our speaker has more insight on this, but has this been effective in other taxing districts in other cities where there is cooperation to get the developments built?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
and the city would pick the percentage of abatement they wanted to give?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually, the abatement is 100% of the building value. The thing that the city gets to pick is the criteria.
100%?
Of the building value. So not the land. So whatever the land is being taxed at, the land you continue to pay taxes on the land, but the value of the building that gets built, the improvements that get built, all those improvements would be tax exempt for 10 years.
That must be what Primeville did with the big IT place.
Don't know, but
Yeah, they're not paying.
I'll
any
bet you
tax.
dollars to donuts they didn't use MUPTE in Primeville.
I don't know.
There's other, if it's I don't know if that's a apartment or a business, but there are different tax abatements that apply to businesses and commercial development,
Yeah.
industrial development, but this MUPTE is specific to residential.
Okay, so it'd be 100% on the building and you'd get taxes on the land.
Right.
That's a very small amount of taxes that the city would receive, and that's a pretty good chunk of change that the
Yeah.
city would not receive that would be abated for 10 years. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, it's
From the city's perspective, is that worth it, Nick?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
If you have to give 100% tax abatement for the building and you only get taxes for the land, that's a very small chunk in comparison because the building adds a lot of property tax value. And so the city is only getting a small amount for 10 years of property tax. And the contractor, the developer,
Yes, it's a trade-off analysis.
is
And
that
so I
something?
would, I always like to tell people 100% of nothing is nothing. So if it's not economically viable, you're not going to have it. So the question is, do you want to forego a portion of your property taxes for a period of time and then have the property taxes after the program or the benefit is up and enjoy that? Or do you want to not have any development there?
So that's what the city looks at, no development versus less taxes.
Yeah, at a very high level, that's really what we're talking about.
It's
Wow.
not less. They're getting the same amount on the land, whether they,
Well, but
it's
yeah, but
developed or not.
your property tax is probably, let's say, if you have an acre of land with housing, with a home built on it and other amenities around the land, you're getting over $2,000 worth of property tax. But if the value of the 1 acre is, say, $60,000, you're getting a whole lot less. I mean, so that's a big trade-off for the city as far as income. Yeah, you're getting more buildings, but you're also having to accommodate sewer, water, all these amenities, fire department and everything, which normally property taxes help cover that. I'm
In
not-
some regards.
I'm
Um,
just asking from a city's perspective, that doesn't seem that great.
Well, I would also say this is exactly why we didn't select it back in 2018. Right? Because it is not as effective as tax increment financing through urban renewal. The MUPTE is urban renewal light. Right? So it's a little harder, it's a little more complicated. This is being identified as a potential option for the city to consider. It's not something we are going to do.
No, I'm
but-
just saying, from a city's perspective, it doesn't sound great.
Yes, it's not as great as other options.
Right. But we're here to try to find a balance between options for the city
Yep.
and the residents.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
that's
And that's just really what's coming in the next slides is the recommendations. So.
okay.
Any other questions before we go to the next slide? Okay. Um, so, um, so just stepping back a little bit to think about the existing incentives, circling back to sort of the beginning of this presentation, overall, as the city looks at updates, we think it makes sense to either reduce or eliminate the incentives that are offered for detached single-family homes, or set some additional eligibility criteria on them that could be a requirement related to the initial sales price that would get you a starting affordability level that would not necessarily last over time, but it would at least ensure that you're not incentivizing the higher priced units out of the gate. Portland has a program that works kind of like that, and it's been pretty effective. So you could tie it to the initial sales price or to unit size if you were to keep incentives for detached single family homes. And either of those would help you kind of focus it towards expanding the supply of kind of more moderately priced units. We also think it makes sense to increase the incentives for middle housing, so cottage units, townhouses, other kind of small units, and increase it somewhat for multifamily development. And we think that it probably makes sense to do that without requiring lasting affordability, just because of the issue I mentioned about kind of narrowing that pool of buyers or renters too far. It's certainly something the city can consider putting some requirements for lasting affordability, but we think the city should really take a hard look at that and all of the trade-offs associated with it, and should consider just trying to focus on the supply that is more moderately priced, and rather than kind of boxing it in. And then offering a potentially greater incentive for units that do provide lasting affordability for households earning below that 100% of area median income. So whether that's a community land trust or just a deed restriction that the city would kind of track, that if in that case, if you were getting a deeper level of affordability and lasting affordability, that could be worth it, a higher level of incentive beyond what would be available for the market rate development. And then looking at mixed income development and potentially offering the option of having a mix of different unit sizes and types and letting the affordable units be the smaller ones, but in that case, potentially offering a little bit less incentive. So if the affordable units are the same as the market rate ones, then they would get potentially more incentive. And if the affordable units are smaller than the market rate ones, or they're a different type, then they would potentially get a little less incentive. So those are some of the things we think the city should consider as they work through the updates of the existing incentives. For new incentives, we think it's worth contemplating MUPD in the R2 zones specifically, where they are not covered by the HURD. And maybe applying those only to city taxes. You're absolutely right that there is an impact to the city's revenues, but so you'd want to think about what kind of eligibility criteria would you be looking for there? What would you want in exchange for that tax abatement? You would need to do some testing and calibration to make sure that what you're expecting is aligned with what you're offering, especially if it's only an abatement on city taxes. But we think that's worth considering for the kind of more smaller R2 zoned areas that are not part of the HURD. And then VHDZ is, it is more limited, as I said, but I think if there are specific areas around the downtown where, again, you really want the ground floor commercial and you would really like to get some more housing there, maybe that helps support the businesses as well as increasing housing supply. If you've got other reasons why you really want that combination of things, we think VHDZ could potentially be worth exploring for those kind of downtown adjacent commercial areas. And in that case, the way that VHDZ works, it applies to everybody unless they opt out. And so those taxing districts that have a concern about it, they would just have the opportunity to opt out, and then their property taxes would be untouched. I don't know why one program is different from the other. It's just how the statute is, but that's how those work. So we think neither of them is like a replacement for your existing incentives, but we think there is a potential use case for both of them, and it could be worth some additional consideration if there's if you think that, again, there's an area or a set of goals that kind of aligns with what those programs can do. And that's it for our recommendations. Nick, is there anything else you want to add on to that?
No, I think that pretty well captures it. Questions, concerns from the commissioners?
I was just curious if MUPD or VHDZ has ever been brought up by a developer to the city, like is.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Let me ask a slightly different question. So in a month and a half, something like that, we will bring you the final plan. What questions, concerns do you have that you would want us to respond to when we bring it back to you for recommendation to the city council?
In order to have some of these incentive programs, like the VHDZ, that has to be where there is commercial and residential on top of each other. Is that something, I guess I just need to know from the city's perspective where we want to start developing. Do we want to develop the downtown area? Then we know to focus more on this program or
Yeah.
that program. Do we want to develop more lands that have old buildings on them that we could tear down and get rid of some of the ugly around town and develop there? So I think what I would like to know when you bring that back is where is phase one? Where is phase two? Where is phase three? Where is phase four?
Yeah, so I don't know that we'll be able to answer the questions at that detail because I think what we're looking for is, hey, is this something the city should consider? If yes, then after the plan is approved, then we're going to move forward on implementing that program. And those are the questions that would come up at that time.
Okay.
But I think at a very high level, not to your surprise, your city planner is going to tell you that you need to redevelop your downtown with more commercial and high-density housing, right? You want a synergy of activity in your downtown by people living there, but also people coming and conducting commerce there, dining,
Right.
eventually, entertainment, things like that. And so the vertical housing development zone is one way to do that. As long as we have our urban renewal district, that also is another tool that can be used as well. But really, downtown matters. There's a lot of opportunities for higher density development. And that's consistent with downtown, our principles for downtown revitalization. In terms of areas outside of the downtown area, it's really, as I look at it, we really need to make some strides and get higher density housing on some of our flatter land, residentially zoned land. We have some areas of the city have some slope and it's challenging to develop. You're never going to get high density there because it's even more expensive to build it
Right.
just because of that. So one of my things I'd like to do in the next year, 1 to 3 years, is really rezone some key properties, bump them up from R1 to R2, which provides a lot more options for residential development, including higher density development, and rezone the lands that are have lower slopes, so it's more feasible.
That seems reasonable.
Commissioner Reynolds is very quiet unusually. You want to follow up with me separately or, okay.
Sorry, like, when you come back in a month and a half, I'm sure you'll have like, definitive qualifiers and like certain allocations as far as what needs to qualify, what needs to be affordable and whatnot. So I'll just wait for the report
Some of that, yes and no.
or the,
But again,
not the
kind of
report,
the
but the-
same response to Commissioner Kendall's question. These are actions or directions that we want to proceed.
yeah.
Some of the details about affordability, number of units, or types of housing, things like that will be figured out when we develop
Yeah.
the individual programs at a later time.
Yeah, we'll just wait and see and
Okay.
figure it out.
All right.
But we have to have this as a foundation before we can do the action plans.
Yes. Yeah. It's entirely reasonable to say, hey, city council, we like this plan. We want to recommend you to approve it. But maybe here's these 13 things that we have concerns about that we want you to address as you move forward towards implementation. We could do that too. Like figuring out, where you're going to use a vertical housing and development zone, don't use it here, use it there. Or, we want you to focus on all income levels of housing, not just workforce or low income. Or maybe you want to focus only on workforce or low income, whatever it is that you would like to see, you can add some additional comments onto that recommendation for them to consider.
And so we can say, yeah, we like this, but we want the city council to look at phase one, phase two, phase three.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's important. I mean, it's nice to have this foundation, but if you don't give people an idea of where some of this implementation is going to go, you have no place to put your brain. It's just still too abstract. And part of our planning is to see how we can make the city more viable, more desirable, and you have to have some kind of vision. It can't be just totally abstract out there in Never Never Land.
Yeah. But I would also ask you, Commissioner Kendall, to also think about when we approved the Housing Action Plan 2018, and then, 2.5 years later, we brought forth a slew of code amendments that are all consistent with that,
Right.
right? And so through that, there was lots of questions about all that. So we worked a lot with the Planning Commission, the City Council on
And
that as
even
well.
the people that did the analysis on the parking. I mean, you guys spent copious amount of time and energy, and we spent several meetings with, understanding what the parking system would be and how we could implement it in the downtown area and different things like that. So, I don't want to see all our hard work, all your hard work, not have some kind of way to now pull it all together and say, this is what the fruition came of all that hard work.
Yeah.
And if the city council, I mean, it's almost like making a commitment, it's like, you don't want to be a fiance forever, commit to the marriage
Yeah.
date.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like commit to, okay, we're going to focus our time, energy, money, incentives here first, wherever here is. And
Yeah.
it sounds like the downtown is the way to go, because I see that in a lot of cities. They build up their downtown area. I even see it in European cities. You always have the hub, and then you have, further out.
Yeah.
So you have to have that hub to bring the people into the viability of income.
Nick, if the other taxing districts aren't on board, is the MUPTI dead? Would you, in your mind? If the other taxing districts aren't.
I don't know
on
if it's
board for an
dead, it's
abate-
just-
I mean,
it-
is it,
Just not as effective.
it's not as,
No.
it's not as like,
You're not getting as much off. The city can only give, like, say, 3%, and the other districts could add another
Well, it's
2% each or something.
$3.31.
per thousand.
It's 3.3134 or something like that per thousand. So
the
$3.31 per thousand.
Right.
And so, pick a number you want to figure out for your the development in downtown. You take a $6 million project. Right now, I think our change property ratio is about 38% for multifamily. So take that $6 million dollar development, multiply it by 0.38, and then multiply it by 3.3134 or whatever it is. And that's the amount of property
Mhm.
taxes that they're going to get in abatement. Does that number help them out? I don't know. That's where their performa and that's where their
Right.
expertise matters. But I think, part of the reason why MUPTI and the Vertical Housing Development Zone program are being suggested is we are hearing, we understand the feedback from the taxing districts that the herd is impacting them. So the herd also doesn't exist in your downtown. We do have the Madras Urban Renewal District in the downtown area, but that has $4 million left in indebtedness. So it's not going to be here in perpetuity. So we need to find other creative ways to develop. And so it may not be effective today, but maybe in the future it will be.
Well, and I think those tools, going back to what you mentioned before, they're targeting projects that wouldn't happen if we didn't have the tool. And so we might not have that money for 10 years, but it will come in 10 years, and it wouldn't have if that building wasn't built.
Right.
Nick, I just wanted to just add on to something that you had said to folks, that I think one of the things that's helpful for us and helping Nick write this plan is my hope is that we can get to a point, through conversation with Planning Commission and Council and working with staff, that we would be able to say something like, this is just an example, this is not necessarily what it would actually say, something like, explore using MUPTI to incentivize this type of housing in this type of place, and either like try to work with the overlapping, try to, seek support from overlapping taxing districts to make it apply to everyone, or don't even try to get support from overlapping taxing districts. Just focus on what you can do with city taxes alone. And a little bit like what we are doing with some of the code amendments to try to say, this is the type of thing we're trying to do, and this is the outcome we're trying to achieve, right? We're suggesting updating this thing to get at this outcome. And that really helps provide some direction for implementation of not just like, yeah, look at MUFTI, but what is the city wanting to, hoping that MUFTI can do, knowing what the range of options are and what the possibilities are. What would you want to see happen with it, and trying to land in a place where we can say, you know, this is the specific option of MUFTI that we want to look at, or consider VHDZ for areas like right in the downtown or whatever it is. But that's the kind of thing that I think we would like to be able to get to with this housing action plan, knowing that there absolutely will be additional work to do to see like exactly what that looks like, and does it work, and where, you know, where is that actual boundary, and all that. But having a little bit of direction about what you would want, what you would want to accomplish with those tools, I think will be very helpful.
Thank you for that. All right, commissioners, any further discussion on the matter? Okay. This isn't your last discussion on it, so you have the right to change your mind and ask more questions. All right, thank you so much, Becky, for joining us this evening. I will have Bethany reach out to you just to make sure we have a meeting either next week or the following week on our calendars to discuss the calendar moving forward. I'm supposed to be on vacation this week. I came in just for the Planning Commission. And so I'm just broadly making you aware of that because I don't even know what my calendar looks like next week. So we'll move forward on that. Thank you.
Thanks to you
Okay.
all as well.
Commissioner Kendall, is there anything else?
Is there any additional discussion from the other commissioners? Okay, then shall we adjourn the meeting?
Just wanted to bring to your attention real quick that May 7th and 14th will be our next meetings. And those will either be trainings or actual meetings for business. May 7th, May 14th.
Okay.
Also, Ian, please make sure you're getting emails from Bethany or I regarding the plan. Okay.
Yep, it's all set up. Good to
Great.
go.
Great. Didn't want any fatal flaws, so to speak. So thank you, commissioners.
Then shall we adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
Then I call a meeting adjourned at 7:50. Meeting adjourned.